The scene where Sugo is taking advantage of Asuna, both in SAO and in real life, it's one of the show's darkest moments, and I'm curious what it was like for you to dub that moment and what memories you have of it.
Man, any time that something's happening for a character where I feel like they're being slighted or not heard or not fully appreciated, it's very hard for me to record because I get very defensive of the character. And I want to protect them, and there's been a lot of times for Asuna where she's been in a situation where I feel like she's been underestimated or not fully seen and not fully appreciated, and that's always hard to record. But it's lovely to get to work with our director Alex Von David and our producer Hiroe, and the rest of the cast is amazing. But our writer and director Alex will always make sure that every moment is just right, and we'll do the scenes multiple times if we need to make sure we get it perfectly. So with every scene in Sword Art, because obviously there are a lot of emotionally intense scenes, I always trust that if something is not hitting exactly the way that it should be, that Alex will make sure that we do each moment exactly right, so that there's not too much Cherami defending Asuna, because we've got to protect Asuna's image and her character, because sometimes I'll get a little too bold to make sure that Asuna is being protected, because I love her so much.
According to a 2014 Canadian study, 60% of women with disabilities experience some form of violence, often by their caregivers. And considering Asuna's comatose-like state with the headset and SAO, I was wondering what your thoughts are on that kind of comparison.
Yeah, that was really, really hard to work on and to record. Just to know that somebody that you're playing is in such a vulnerable position, and that the character was being taken advantage of in that way was really upsetting. And now we get to see in the game as well as in the real world what that looks like. And there's been a lot of conversation with people coming up to me saying, like, Asuna is such a strong character and we hated seeing her that way, and why was it depicted that way? And I think when I look at those episodes, yes, it's terrifying, and she seems very vulnerable, and I think it's easy for people to say that she seems weak, but at no point in the show, in what is depicted with the animation, or in the light novels, which I've done the audiobooks for, she never gave up, and she was biding her time, and she was being aware and like watching with the control panel, and I think that that's something that needs to be considered, is when you're in the situation and people say, well, why don't they leave, or why are they not standing up? You've got to watch your circumstances and make sure that it's the perfect storm of elements, and that you have everything planned and taken care of. And it's very hard to look at someone's situation and say, well, I think they're such a strong person, why are they making this choice that is seemingly not the right choice for them? But you don't know behind the scenes or in their mind what they're navigating and working through. And that's a cause that's very important to me, is helping women in those situations, having to navigate leaving a toxic relationship or leaving a toxic family environment to protect themselves and to protect their children. And it takes a lot of strength to stay in it, to bide the time, to find the right moment, and then also to rebuild after the fact, and navigate what that looks like in your life. And there are so many great organizations that can help people through that. But as I've talked to friends of mine that are psychologists and social workers and organizations that work through that, and work with women and families in that way, it's really, really difficult because they are inundated. And specifically during the last 2 years, they said there were a lot of men and women and children that, because of the pandemic, they were now isolated with their abuser, or isolated in the toxic situation, which I think mirrors Sword Art Online so well. She was absolutely isolated, and one of the few people that was supposed to be a caretaker for her was actually the person that was the most abusive and the most toxic for her, and that is devastating. So I'm happy that those organizations are there, and I I wish there was more ways to provide more resources, because I know the people that work in that type of service industry and working with those organizations and those individuals, it's so taxing, not just emotionally and with the resources that they need, but physically. It's really, really demanding to keep finding the strength every single day. So I loved that the show depicted not just strength in battle with a sword, which Asuna we know handles so well, but additionally strength through vulnerability and finding the strength in the most devastating of circumstances.
I wanted to mention, by the way, on the scene, when I interviewed Todd Habercorn a few years ago, he stopped the whole interview when I asked him, and he called you and he left a voicemail, right?
Yes.
And he said that, let's have dinner, and if you don't answer, then it's a yes. And I was curious if that dinner ever happened, and in general, if he really left a voicemail or he was just egging us on.
He'll call. I don't know what it is about. We've joked so many times. He'll be on a panel, and he'll say, hey, I'm gonna call Cherami really quick, and I'll say hi. And so I will look down at my phone randomly on the weekends. Usually, if I'm at a convention, I'm probably in a panel myself. And if I'm not at a convention, more than likely I'm doing laundry or carrying on with my day on my weekend off. And I'll look down and be like, I missed a call from Todd. What did he need? Oh my gosh, I hope everything's okay. And I'll listen to the voicemail. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what it is that I always happen to miss his call. It's so funny that you say, did that dinner ever happen? We were working on a project where he was directing me on a show. And he said, I feel like we have to schedule time to see each other. We either have to have a session where I'm directing or you're directing, or we have to have a callback, or we have to have something or other. And he said, we're going to have to schedule a dinner. I'm going to have to book a time in my calendar and say, like, does this time work for you? Pick a time. We're going to schedule a dinner. So we have a Calendly invite in motion so that we can set a time to go to dinner, because we live like 10 minutes from each other, but he's so busy and I'm so busy and our schedules have yet to align. So we've joked, we've had dinner at conventions while we're here at the events, but we haven't gotten to like hang out and just like decompress and have a friendly dinner. I told him, I was like, my husband's got to come, your wife's got to come, we've all got to get everybody together to hang out. So hopefully that's coming soon.
Speaking of your husband, if you lost all your memories except the last 2 years, like Asuna, an ordinal scale,
man,
do you think your husband could make up for it, or?
Yeah, my husband's fantastic, and I'm really, really lucky to have a great family and to have a great partner. They usually come with me to conventions. I can't imagine how difficult that would be for my loved ones. But I think it would be harder on me. I pride myself on having a really great memory, and I love getting to look back on memories and say, like, do you remember where we were when this happened, and this was the restaurant we went to, and I remember it was on the left side. And so I think I would feel so lost in the world if I only had the last 2 years of memories of my life. That would be really challenging. I'm like, man, all of my dear friends from high school, I wouldn't have any of those memories. I wouldn't have any of that. But my husband and I have a great relationship, so I know that would be fine. He would find ways to like bring up things and try to remember, find ways to remember things. But it would be really, really difficult for me in a lot of ways to let go of some of those things that I hold so dear. I love getting to look back on my memories and to look back at pictures and be like, who are these people? What's going on? That would be really hard.
What do you think about what Yuna's father said, though, about how they were better off not remembering SAO? Do you think sometimes it's better to forget a tragedy, even if there's some good things that come with it?
Yeah, I think I mean, certainly that's a coping mechanism that a lot of people have, is like they will just have to dissociate and block the memory completely in order to move forward, because it's so difficult. For me personally, I am somebody that would like to dig and go back and find the history, find the missing pieces, so that I could see what was missing, so that I could heal and look at the full picture and say, okay, so this is where this trauma comes from. This is why I'm scared of this, or this is why I'm dealing with this. And now that I have the missing piece, I can see the picture and move forward and heal. But I know for many people that's not the case. They're like, I would just rather forget it, not worry about it, and be able to move on fresh. And I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to go about it. It's different human beings need different things based on their experiences. And if something was so traumatic, like what happened in Sword Art Online, I'm sure there's many people that would have to say, like, I just can't look at it, can't remember it, I need to move and let it go so I can move on with my life. And that's what serves people best. That's what they have to do.
Do you feel any parent will do what he did in Ordinal Scale? I don't know if you have children or not, but is that something
we
you
do? My husband and I do not have children. We hope to at some point. I'm sure there are many parents. I think every parent would love to just make sure that their child is protected. We went and saw a play last night that was all about parents saying, I just want to protect my child from pain, or I just want to make that pain go away, and I just want to have my child with me and make sure they're happy. And I'll talk to my mom or my dad and I'll say, like, you know, I know that they would want to protect me from things. My mom wanted me to not be in this business because she said it's incredibly traumatic. It's incredibly hard. The business does not care about the human being behind it. And they did not want me as a child going through that. They thought that was an unnecessary thing for a child to go through, but it was what I wanted. So they were left with the difficult decision of, do we help our child follow their dreams, even though they're very naive about the context and the industry and the business of it all, and we will help them navigate that? Or do we keep them out of the world of acting and allow her to find her way when she's older and can make that choice? And I'm very happy that they allowed me to do this work in this industry as a child. And I'm so happy that I had such supportive parents. But there are many times I'll say, oh, this is something that I'm working through. I had this traumatic experience. I had this horrible memory. And my parents will say, I'm so sorry that we couldn't protect you from that. And they can't protect me from that. And the play that I saw last night, one of the lines was, the only thing that we can know about life is pain is inevitable, and it helps us grow and it teaches us empathy. And if we protect children from that and don't allow them to grow and experience that, are they going to be as empathetic and compassionate and strong and capable without those experiences? With that being said, of course, you want to be able to protect them from unnecessary pain and unnecessary trauma. But they will experience some sort of setback or frustration or sadness or anger. And if they have a great support system, like I was lucky enough to have, like so many children do, with their parents that will talk to them and say, I have your back. Let's go talk to someone. Let's figure out what we can do to heal this or give you the right skills to move forward. Then I think the kids are better off for it, and then they'll be better parents, and the generational healing will continue in that way. But I totally understand why he made that choice, because he loves his daughter and just wants her to be safe and wants her to be free of pain and be with him. And that's really a hard thing to do, and I can't imagine that because I don't have children. But I can only imagine that that's what a parent would like to do, is to be able to protect their kids from anything that would cause them pain.
I thought one of your best scenes as Asuna was with Yuuki when you're at the hospice and you're holding her hand. Yeah. And I'm curious if you remember that moment. It's really hard scene to watch.
It is a very hard scene to watch.
Yeah.
And we just did we just got to record the audiobook for that arc as well. And it's so hard. While I was working on that arc of the show, I was dealing with the loss of my great aunt, and I thought I had gone through the grieving process. And then when we were going through and recording the show, I was realizing, oh no, I had compartmentalized some of this and said, like, I'll deal with that at another time. And because I had to say these lines and go through these scenes with Asuna, it kind of forced me to go through that healing. And so people always say, are there things that you've learned from Asuna? There's so many things that I've learned from Asuna. But one of the things that I have so been appreciative of all of the characters that I've played is there's been moments with each one of them where a scene will come up or a line will come up, and I will say, wow, this is very poignant and pertinent to me in this moment, and I would not have faced this if not for having to go through it with the character. And that's such a bonding moment, that while Asuna is with this character going through hospice, I feel like Asuna and I are holding hands walking through this moment and this healing journey together. So those are some of my favorite moments where my life meets with Asuna's life in the show, and it feels really honest and real, and really poignant. So it's nice to look back on those scenes.
I was talking to Brina recently in the Future Diary, and she described to me when she returned to the show how it was so different that the character was nice all of a sudden. And I'm curious if you feel your approach to voicing Asuna has changed over the years in any way, or kind of coming back after a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it has shifted. Bryce and I were talking about, we were watching an interview when we first got the job, and we look so different, and I think we sound different. We'll still hear our references, and we'll match our references, which is great. But yeah, I mean, I have 10 more years of life experience. So when we were going back into Sword Art Online Progressive Part 1, and we're working on the show again, and it's Asuna before we even meet her in the series. Like, it predates that. I listened to my reference, and I said, can I pitch her up a little bit? And we had to kind of find, like, well, she's a little more naive in this area. She's a little bit more guarded in this area, and kind of rebuilding the walls that we had broken down with Asuna over the years, or her inexperience with gaming, kind of bringing that in. And so it's been very fun to kind of get to build a backstory. You mentioned forgetting memories, and it was like we're adding to the memory banks as if we hadn't met that part of Asuna, because we hadn't, which was really fun to get to do. And I'm so thankful that the team that we've had, which is not always the case for a show specifically when it runs for 10 years, we're so fortunate to have had Alex Von David and Hideaway, our producer, from day one, and they're still with us now. And that is really lucky to have those two people as touchstones for the character, to know, like, does this really sound like Asuna? Should we reword this scene? Can we change the inflection here? Because they've been with us since the beginning. So they've seen us grow, and they know what these characters need to look and sound like. So it's very fortunate to have that kind of element, so that we can, like, phone a friend and check in with the director and make sure everything's working as it should.
Do you still remember your original audition for
Absolutely.
What was it like?
I had just moved to Los Angeles. This was the first show that I auditioned for, with the first anime that I auditioned for with a studio in LA. And I'd been doing a lot of on-camera work, and I was like, man, I really would like to get into voiceover again. And everybody's like, it's really hard to get into. And I had said, but I've done so much in Dallas, I would really love to have a shot. And so I had one person, and I still don't know who it was, but I just got an email that said you were referred by an actor who thought you might be a good fit to work with us. And I've asked around, I'm like, who was that actor who referred me? Still have no idea. So to whoever they are, thank you so much. I'm sure I've worked with them a million times. But this actor had referred me to the studio. I got the audition, and I did not have a home setup. I recorded my audition on my iPhone in the closet, and then sent it in. Didn't expect to hear anything, but I was really excited about Sword Art, because I had heard from going to conventions, a lot of people had said, we really think you'd like this show. We know you like stuff that's really grounded and realistic, and this is such a great show. So I had watched an episode, and I was hooked, and I had hoped I would get a small part on the show and get to know the people and get to know the team. And I remember getting called in for my callback and meeting Alex and meeting Hideaway, and we had this work session, trying the voice a little bit higher, trying the voice a little bit lower, adding on all these different elements. I left the callback, and I said, well, I hope that I probably won't get cast as Asuna, but I hope I'll get to do like a bit part or get to work on one episode. I loved getting to work with Alex and Hideaway, and I hope I'll get to work with them again. And they called a week later and asked me to come in and voice Asuna, and I was very excited. So yeah, it was my first voiceover job in LA.
Are auditions much different when you're doing it for like a Nintendo game like Fire Emblem?
It depends. I mean, I think auditions have definitely shifted now, since the pandemic, we used to be able, there were certain studios that would say, could you come in and audition? Like for, when I worked on Cyberpunk 2077, when my first audition, I went into the studio and auditioned for that. When I auditioned for Nier to play A2, I auditioned in studio for that. I think for Fire Emblem, I think I probably came in to audition for Rhea. But now, because of the pandemic, I would say probably 99% of our auditions just come through email, and we never get to meet the producers. We never get to see the production team, and you're kind of just, you get a piece of paper with some lines and a paragraph and a description, maybe a picture if you're lucky, and you kind of have to figure out what do you think they're looking for? How does that, work with who you are as an actor and who you are as a person, and then create this audition, and hopefully you'll hear back. Sometimes they'll just cast you off of the audition, and sometimes they'll say, we would like to do a Zoom callback or work with you on this, and I love getting to meet the team and hear about these characters, hear what they were inspired by when they created them, and kind of get to play and say like, oh, you didn't like this kind of thing, well maybe we could do this, and be more collaborative. And it's harder to do that when they just send in an audition and you send in an MP3, and you kind of got to hope that with that one swing that you hit it out of the park, but that's not always the case.
It must be hard to keep those NDAs.
It's impossible. Yeah, I think the hardest one for Cyberpunk 2077, I did the first demo in 2018, and I thought, well, it would be great if I got to get cast in the actual game, but I don't know. I was like, this is such a big game. By the time it comes to the release, it's probably going to be a movie star. And then I was coming home from a convention and saw that Keanu Reeves is going to be in Cyberpunk. I was like, oh man, he got my part. And then I found out like, no, it's still me. So between 2018 doing the demo and late 2020 when the game came out, I had to keep a secret for about 2.5 years. And people were asking me about it because people had discussed the game and kind of thought that maybe that might be my voice. And it was very hard to just lie and be like, what's a cyberpunk universe? Who? Keanu Reeves? I don't know who that is, because I'm a terrible liar. So I just plead ignorance and denial for everything across the board.
Well, I mean, you do on-screen stuff, so
I do.
A star.
Yeah. I guess I've told people, I'm like, I'm a good liar when I have the lines in front of me and I know what I need to say. But when it's me, I'm not. I can't surprise anybody. My whole family knows exactly what they're getting for holidays or birthdays before they're getting it, because as soon as I get it, I'm so excited. I'm like, do you guys want to know what I got you? Well, it's definitely not this. And they're like, what? I'm the like 5-year-old child who's like, Dad, I definitely didn't get you socks, but I got you socks, just because I'm so excited. It's exciting to get to share these things and to work on these projects, and it's really hard to keep it from people, especially when they're asking specifically about that one project.
I saw the creator of the Oculus Rift headset recently rigged like basically an SAO headset, a lethal headset, and I was wondering what your thoughts on, art becoming life pretty much like that.
Well, I mean, that was one of the things when my mom saw the first episode of Sword Art Online, she said she really appreciated the creator sharing one of the reasons why they created the series and shared the series was they said this technology could be here by 2022. And of course, now we have caught up to and passed the day that the characters were trapped in the game. And I don't want anybody to live in fear or be concerned and say, like, I'm not going to try out new technology, but I think it is something to be aware of and considerate of. We've had so many incredible technological advances, some for the betterment of society, and some, you could argue, not for the betterment of society. So kind of finding that balance of, like, utilizing technology to help us, but also not losing the humanity and still being able to interact with people in person. I have so many friends that will say, like, oh, I'll just text them. I don't want to call them or see them in person. I'll just text them or check out what they're dealing with on Facebook. But there's nothing like an in-person meeting and getting to share a meal and share an experience and see how people are doing. It's not the same as messaging somebody on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. It's lovely to get to have those options because we're moving so quickly, but it's not the same. So I'm very cautious. I know Bryce is always a little bit more like, I'll give it a shot. I'm a little bit more cautious about living a life or having a life in a virtual world. I guess I really love all of the getting to experience life with all the five senses. And I know you could do that in the virtual world, but what would that do to the real world? I don't know. I guess that remains to be seen. So, yeah, it is definitely something to be aware of and something to be considerate of. I will not be the first person putting it on my head to try it out.
What would it take for you to wear one?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
$1 million?
I don't know. I would be really nervous. I've seen so many things. But one of the things in the Mother Zajario arc that I really loved was the Medicuboid and getting to see that it allowed them a new life. So certainly it is beneficial for many people, and obviously these characters have found a strength because of existing in this real world, in this virtual world, that they did not have that strength in the real world. So there definitely are perks to it. I don't know. I would hate to say I would have to see how it works out for other people, but I wouldn't be like, I'm so excited to be a beta tester. I guess I'm very much like Asuna in that way. She is not a beta tester, and I wouldn't be a beta tester either.
Is it surreal to realize that 10 years of your life it's been connected to this character?
Yeah.
Like a decade, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, Bryce and I didn't believe it. We were like, yeah, it's not, but it's not been 10 years for us. And then he was going through his phone, and he sent me a screenshot, and it said 9 years ago. And it was our first convention that we got to go to together. And I said, this is so weird, but when we think back on it, I mean, I got engaged during the first season of the show, and I had just moved. It marked the beginning of a lot of things for me, moving to Los Angeles. I had gotten engaged. So just to look back 10 years ago and see what my life looked like then and what my life looked like now, and getting to have Asuna as a companion on this journey is absolutely surreal. I never would have thought that when we worked on this show 10 years ago that I would get to be playing this character for 10 years. And we're still doing more projects for Sword Art, which is pretty incredible. And getting to meet families that come up, or young people that come up and say, this was the first show that I saw, this was what got me into anime. And since then I've seen all these other shows. When I was watching anime as a kid, the shows that were getting people into anime were Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, and Pokemon. And now for some people that show is Fairy Tail, that show is Sword Art, and that's it's really a great honor, and it's absolutely surreal. I never would have imagined when I started working in anime right after high school that I would ever be in a show that had run for so many episodes that people have said, like, this was my gateway show into anime, which is very, very cool.
Is there a scene you feel was the most difficult for you to record in the series, or?
There's usually one or two scenes in every single film or in every single season where I'm like, man, this one is rough. I know for the Sword Art Online Progressive Part 1, we were recording that. I was recording it from home because it was during the quarantine period, and there's a scene where Asuna is really defeated, really isolated, really depressed, and yet she has to keep going. She has to find the strength. If she gives up, she could die in this world. And while we were recording that, I was dealing with feeling really frustrated and really depressed from being isolated and not being able to do on-camera work, not being able to see my friends, not being able to travel and see my family. And you know, when we were told when everything started, it's going to be 2 weeks. And we were like, okay, 2 weeks, we'll take a break. Well, then the studios were like, it's going to be longer than 2 weeks. We need to start recording. And so we were kind of navigating all that. But when it kept going on and there seemed to be no end in sight, and we still don't know how long we'll be dealing with this, it was really hard to be like, well, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? And so while Asuna is kind of dealing with this, how am I going to get out of this? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel for her in that scene? And she's kind of fighting in this dungeon. that was a really hard scene to do, and we had to find the line just right where Alex would say, like, you can be a little more angry, you can be a little bit more depressed, you can be a little bit more frustrated, and then he's like, I think that might be a little bit too frustrated, I think that might have a little bit too much grit or strength or anger. I don't know if Asuna is quite there yet. There might have been a little bit too much gravel in your voice on that. So kind of trying to find that perfect balance where it was still Asuna, but it still had a little bit of me, but it still felt desperate and it felt angry, and you could see that she was starting to turn into a fighter and a warrior, but she was broken and she was tired and she was worn out. And so that was a really tricky scene to navigate and hit just right. And it was very, very it was a perfect way to end the film when we watched it. And Bryce sent me a text. He was like, you in the dungeon scene was he was like, I was welling up. That was so hard to watch. And I was like, we got it. If Bryce said that was the right mark, then we got it.
So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
It's great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you. It's good to see you again.
And remember, the film's coming out on the 24th on Crunchyroll.
Yes. Something else to be thankful for on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.